Imagine a shield, not one forged from steel or projected from science fiction, but of something far more complex, far more delicate, and infinitely more valuable. A shield built from the purest silicon, etched with patterns so small they defy the laws of physics as we once knew them. For decades, this silicon shield has served as the invisible, almost mythical defense of a small island at the very heart of the global economy. The theory behind it was as elegant as it was brutally effective. Taiwan, a democratic island of 24 million people, manufactures over 60% of the world's semiconductors. But that figure is misleading. When you isolate for the most advanced chips, the bleeding-edge logic processors that function as the brains of our smartphones, our data centers, our artificial intelligence, and, most critically, our modern weapon systems, Taiwan's global market share skyrockets to over 90%. An invasion of Taiwan, therefore, would mean turning off the modern world. It would be an act of economic self-immolation so catastrophic that no rational adversary, not even its powerful neighbor China, would dare risk it. And if they did, the world, led by the United States, would have no choice but to intervene, not just for geopolitical principle, but to prevent its own technological and military infrastructure from grinding to a halt. A single Javelin anti-tank missile, for instance, contains over 250 individual semiconductor chips. A disruption in Taiwan would be a direct and immediate threat to American national security. This shield has held. It has been the bedrock of a fragile, unspoken peace in what is arguably the world's most dangerous geopolitical flashpoint. But what happens when that shield begins to crack? Not from an external attack, but from a strategic decision made by its closest friend. What if the very nation sworn to protect the island is the one systematically dismantling its primary defense? This is the story of a high-stakes geopolitical gamble, a crisis of confidence shaking America's most critical allies to their core. Is America breaking Taiwan's silicon shield? To understand the shield, you first have to understand the Foundry. For most of the late 20th century, the semiconductor industry was dominated by giants like Intel. These were integrated device manufacturers, or IDM. They did everything in-house. They designed their own chips, and they built them in their own multi-billion-dollar factories, known as fabs. It was a vertically integrated, capital-intensive model that few could compete with. But in 1987, a company on the island of Taiwan, with significant backing from its government, pioneered a revolutionary new business model, the pure-play Foundry. That company was the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. Its pitch to the world was transformative. You focus on designing the best chips, we'll focus on the impossibly complex task of building them for you. This simple idea horizontally disintegrated the supply chain and unleashed a tidal wave of innovation. It gave birth to the fabless semiconductor industry. Visionary companies like Nvidia, Qualcomm, and even Apple were suddenly freed from the staggering financial burden of building and operating their own fabs. They could pour all their resources into one thing, design. And TSMC wasn't just a contract manufacturer, it became the best. It relentlessly pursued Moore's law, the observation that the number of transistors on a chip doubles approximately every 2 years, driving exponential increases in computing power. TSMC mastered the most difficult, capital-intensive, and unforgiving manufacturing process on Earth, a process that can take up to 24 weeks and involve over 1,400 distinct steps to turn a raw silicon wafer into a finished chip. Today, Taiwan's dominance is absolute. While the United States, the birthplace of the semiconductor, now manufactures only about 10 to 12% of the world's chips, Taiwan accounts for over 60% of the contract manufacturing market. And again, when you look only at the most advanced logic chips, those with features smaller than 10 nanometers, the kind needed for cutting-edge AI, Taiwan's share is over 90%, The United States produces virtually none of these at scale. This shift was not just a business innovation, it was a geopolitical one. It created a system of deep, structural interdependence, where America's greatest technological strength, chip design, became inextricably linked to and dependent upon Taiwan's greatest strength, manufacturing execution. This unprecedented concentration of critical technology on one small island gave rise to the silicon shield theory, an idea first articulated by journalist Craig Addison over 2 decades ago. The theory operates on 2 powerful interlocking assumptions, each aimed at a different global power. The first function of the shield is to deter China. Beijing's leaders are acutely aware that a military invasion of Taiwan would almost certainly result in the destruction or incapacitation of TSMC's advanced fabs. As TSMC's own former chairman, Mark Liu, bluntly stated in an interview, in the event of an attack, the company's most advanced chip factory would become inoperable. This would instantly sever the supply of high-end chips that China's own colossal electronics assembly industry, which produces 90% of the world's smartphones and over half of all PCs, desperately needs to function. The resulting economic shockwave would be devastating, potentially crippling China's own economy and threatening the stability of the Communist Party's rule. The second, and arguably more critical function of the shield, is to act as an unbreakable tripwire for American military intervention. The United States' technological and military supremacy is now built upon a foundation of Taiwanese silicon. The Pentagon's most advanced weapons systems are utterly dependent on a steady supply of these chips. A blockade or invasion that halts production in Taiwan would not just be an economic crisis, it would be a direct threat to U.S. national security, degrading its military readiness overnight. The economic fallout alone would be unimaginable. One study by the Rhodium Group estimated that a blockade of Taiwan could cost the global economy over $2 trillion, with companies like Apple, Dell, and HP losing hundreds of billions in revenue. Another estimate from the U.S.-Taiwan Business Council suggested a potential loss of nearly $1 trillion to the U.S. economy alone. In such a scenario, the logic goes, the United States would be compelled to defend Taiwan, not merely out of an abstract commitment to democracy, but out of stark strategic and economic self-interest. This creates a fascinating and dangerous paradox at the heart of the US-Taiwan relationship. For the silicon shield to work, Taiwan must remain a point of strategic vulnerability for the United States. The American incentive to defend the island is directly proportional to its dependence on it. Any policy that reduces that dependence, that makes the US feel less vulnerable, inherently weakens the second and most important pillar of the shield. For years, this delicate geopolitical balance held. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic and the global chip shortage of 2021. The crisis was a brutal, real-world stress test of the global supply chain, and it exposed just how fragile it was. Suddenly, from the halls of Congress to the boardrooms of the Fortune 500, Washington woke up to what many were now calling its dangerous dependence on Taiwan. The response was swift and monumental. In August 2022, President Biden signed the CHIPS and Science Act into law. It was a massive piece of industrial policy, authorizing roughly $280 billion in new funding, including a $52.7 billion fire hose of direct subsidies and tax credits aimed at one primary goal: bringing advanced semiconductor manufacturing back to American soil. On the surface, it was hailed as a win-win for the US-Taiwan alliance. TSMC, incentivized by a promised $6.6 billion in grants and $5 billion in loans, announced a landmark investment in Arizona, a project that has since ballooned from an initial $12 billion to over $65 billion. US officials celebrated the move as a step towards supply chain resilience. But inside Taiwan, a profoundly different and more anxious narrative quickly took hold. The move sparked a fierce political debate, summed up by a single resonant phrase, Taokong, the hollowing out. The fear is that by transferring its most advanced technology and talent to the United States, Taiwan is willingly giving away its most precious strategic asset. Politicians from the opposition Kuomintang (KMT) party framed it as the Tsai administration gifting TSMC to the United States. The KMT's legislative caucus whip, Fu Kun-chi, captured the anxiety perfectly when he asked, "Where is Taiwan's national security if TSMC becomes ASMC, American Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, and the sacred mountain that protects the country is gone?" This is the core of the de-Taiwanization fear. As the US, Japan, and Germany build their own advanced fabs with TSMC's direct assistance, the island's strategic indispensability, its shield, will be fatally eroded. From this perspective, the CHIPS Act is not a partnership. It is a strategic extraction driven by America's desire to reduce its own vulnerability, even if it comes at the cost of Taiwan's security. This perceived hollowing out is not just about factories and equipment, it is about people. The Arizona project required TSMC to dispatch thousands of its most experienced engineers, along with their families, to the Arizona desert to get the new fabs up and running. The scale of the relocation is staggering. Within 2 years, over 200 American babies were born to these Taiwanese families in Phoenix, a testament to the sheer size of the community being transplanted. This exodus immediately ignited fears of a brain drain, siphoning off the island's most valuable and irreplaceable asset: its human capital. This is not merely a loss of personnel. It is the potential erosion of an entire industrial ecosystem. Taiwan's stunning success is built on the foundation of hyper-concentrated industrial clusters, like the Hsinchu Science Park, where a dense network of suppliers, specialized vendors, and world-class engineering talent are all located within miles of each other. This proximity allows for a level of efficiency, collaboration, and problem-solving speed that is unparalleled anywhere else in the world. It is an ecosystem that has been meticulously cultivated over 4 decades, and it is nearly impossible to replicate from scratch. The move to Arizona has also exposed a deep cultural chasm between the Taiwanese and American work ethics. Reports have detailed near-constant friction on the construction site and inside the fab. Taiwanese managers and engineers, products of a famously intense, high-pressure, military-style work culture, were shocked by American labor norms. They are accustomed to engineers working 12-hour days, being on call on weekends, and rushing back to the fab in the middle of the night if an earthquake strikes. In contrast, they reportedly found American workers less dedicated, with some Taiwanese engineers complaining they would have to pick up the slack. American workers, in turn, have filed lawsuits alleging a toxic and discriminatory environment, claiming that Taiwanese supervisors frequently communicate in Mandarin, berate them as lazy or stupid, and overwhelmingly favor other Taiwanese employees for promotions. These cultural and logistical hurdles have had a very real impact. The Arizona project has been plagued by significant delays and cost overruns. TSMC founder Morris Chang himself warned that building fabs in the US would be a wasteful, expensive exercise, predicting costs could be 50% to 100% higher than in Taiwan. His prediction appears to be coming true. The start of high-volume production at the first fab was delayed from 2024 to 2025, and the second fab's timeline was pushed back from 2026 to 2028. While recent reports suggest the project is dang near back on schedule, the initial struggles were a stark reality check. The challenges of transplanting a fab are a powerful illustration of a deeper truth. Taiwan's advantage is not just cheap labor or government subsidies. It is a unique, high-pressure, and deeply integrated socio-industrial ecosystem. This is Taiwan's secret sauce, and it is not easily exported. This deep-seated anxiety is not unique to Taiwan. Roughly 700 miles away, in the corporate headquarters of Seoul, another semiconductor giant is watching the unfolding drama with profound concern. South Korea, home to global powerhouses Samsung and SK Hynix, is the undisputed world leader in memory chips, the components essential for data storage in everything from servers to smartphones. Like Taiwan, South Korea now finds itself caught in an impossible geopolitical vice. The US CHIPS Act was designed with powerful guardrails. These are strict rules that, in exchange for billions in American subsidies, prohibit recipient companies from engaging in any material expansion of their advanced chip manufacturing capacity in foreign countries of concern, most notably China, for a period of 10 years. But for South Korea, China is not just a country of concern, it is its single largest and most important market. In 2022, a staggering 55% of South Korea's semiconductor exports were destined for China. Its flagship companies have deeply integrated manufacturing footprints there. Samsung's massive plant in Xi'an, for example, produces up to 40% of its global NAND flash memory chips. SK Hynix relies on its Chinese fabs for roughly half of its DRAM chip output. The American policy, therefore, presents an existential choice. Accept US subsidies to build in America and effectively cap your growth in your biggest market, or forego the subsidies and risk being left behind in the race to build a US presence. For South Korean policymakers and corporate executives, this feels less like an invitation to a strengthened alliance and more like a strategic ultimatum, forcing them to damage their own economic interests to align with Washington's geopolitical war against Beijing. South Korea's response has been to fight fire with fire. To prevent its own industrial base from being hollowed out by the powerful magnetic pull of US subsidies, the South Korean government passed its own version of a CHIPS Act, dubbed the K-CHIPS Act. It is a massive package of tax credits and incentives designed to persuade Samsung and SK Hynix to keep their next generation of investment at home. This has kicked off a frantic, globe-spanning subsidy arms race. The European Union has launched its own €43 billion EU CHIPS Act, with the explicit goal of doubling its global market share by 2030. Japan is offering to cover up to 50% of the capital expenditure for new fabs built on its soil. And all of this is happening while China continues to pour tens of billions of dollars into its own big fund to fuel its drive for self-sufficiency. With governments around the world all throwing hundreds of billions of dollars at the same problem, a new and ominous economic fear is beginning to crystallize: the looming danger of a massive global chip glut. After years of painful shortages, the industry could soon find itself drowning in overcapacity. This is especially true for so-called legacy or mature node chips, the less advanced but still vital semiconductors used in cars and industrial equipment. This is a segment where China, unconstrained by export controls, is aggressively expanding its domestic capacity, with its market share projected to surge from 34% in 2024 to 47% by 2027. This uncoordinated nationalistic rush for semiconductor self-sufficiency could trigger a classic boom and bust cycle. A wave of new fabs coming online simultaneously could lead to a collapse in chip prices, turning these multi-billion-dollar, state-funded national champions into unprofitable white elephants. The very strategy designed to secure the supply chain could end up destabilizing the entire industry. But there is a powerful counterargument to these fears of hollowing out and abandonment. It is a pragmatic, perhaps even cynical view that is gaining traction not just in Washington, but even among some strategic thinkers in Taipei and Seoul. This argument posits that the Silicon Shield was never a physical guarantee. It was a theory of deterrence based on economic logic and a web of implicit promises. In a world where China's military power and aggressive rhetoric are growing daily, relying on an implicit guarantee is a dangerous gamble. From this perspective, the CHIPS Act and the resulting investments in places like Arizona and Texas are not weakening the shield, but fundamentally transforming it. By building state-of-the-art fabs on American soil, companies like TSMC and Samsung are not just diversifying their manufacturing footprint, They are physically and economically embedding themselves within the borders of their most powerful protector. They are creating tens of thousands of high-tech American jobs, supplying critical components directly to the US defense industrial base, and making their survival a matter of domestic American politics and prosperity, not just abstract foreign policy. It becomes much harder for a future US administration to abandon Taiwan when TSMC is a major employer in a key electoral swing state like Arizona. This is the essence of the strategic trade-off. Taiwan and South Korea may be giving up a degree of their unique strategic indispensability, but in return, they are gaining a permanent, tangible, and politically potent foothold inside the fortress. The CHIPS Act, in this light, actually deepens and hardens the alliance. It seeks to evolve the relationship from one of a client state's dependence to one of deeply intertwined, mutual integration. The old shield was based on making Taiwan too valuable to lose. The new strategy is about making Taiwan an inseparable part of America itself. Furthermore, the narrative of a complete hollowing out of Taiwan's industry may be a dramatic overstatement, at least for the foreseeable future. The practical, technical, and financial barriers to replicating Taiwan's entire semiconductor frontier are simply immense. The operational struggles at the Arizona fab are a testament to this reality. Even with the full force of US government subsidies, the new American fabs will only account for a fraction of global supply. A 2023 report from the US-Taiwan Business Council noted that it would be nearly impossible to replace Taiwan-made chips over several years. Projections show that by 2030, the US might succeed in producing 20% of the world's advanced logic chips, a significant achievement, but one that would still leave Taiwan with a commanding 58% share of the market. Crucially, the most advanced research and development, the work on the next generations of technology that will power the world of the 2030s, is slated to remain firmly in Taiwan. TSMC has repeatedly assured the Taiwanese government and public that its most cutting-edge processes, like the upcoming 2-nanometer and the revolutionary 1.6-nanometer nodes, will be developed and mass-produced in Taiwan first. The company has been clear that its roots and its technological crown jewels will remain on the island. This means that even with the Arizona fabs fully operational, the world, and the United States, will still be critically dependent on Taiwan for the absolute bleeding edge of technology. The US may secure a resilient supply of today's advanced chips, mitigating the immediate risk of a supply shock. But to power its next generation of AI, supercomputers, and military systems, it will still have to look across the Pacific. The silicon shield, therefore, is not disappearing. It is changing its nature, evolving from a shield based on sheer manufacturing volume to one based on possessing the irreplaceable key to the future. So, is America breaking the silicon shield? The answer, like the microscopic circuits at the heart of this story, is layered and complex. The original shield, the one based on the simple, terrifying logic of total global dependence on a single geographic point, is undeniably being altered. It is being chipped away piece by piece and reforged in the deserts of Arizona, the plains of Texas, and the industrial parks of Japan and Germany. The fear in Taipei and Seoul is palpable and justified. The specter of a hollowing out of their most vital industry and the deep-seated anxiety of being abandoned by their primary protector are not mere political talking points. They are the rational concerns of nations caught in the tectonic collision of superpowers. They are being pushed into a painful, high-stakes gamble, trading a measure of their strategic indispensability for what they hope is a more concrete, more tangible promise of protection. But this gamble is not a blind one. The very act of onshoring has served as a powerful global object lesson. It has revealed to the world just how difficult, how expensive, and how culturally specific Taiwan's and South Korea's success truly is. It has proven that the secret source of their semiconductor ecosystems, A potent mixture of government support, engineering genius, and a relentless high-pressure work ethic cannot simply be bottled and sold. The new reality is one of strategic diversification and deep integration. We are moving from a world where Taiwan's security rested on its status as an untouchable, singular fortress of fabs, to one where its survival is underwritten by a global network of intertwined economic and political interests, with vital outposts built deep inside the walls of its most powerful ally. The shield is not broken, it is being decentralized. And in this new, more dangerous and uncertain era, that may be the only way for it to hold.